Keanu Reeves stood in the first-class line, dressed simply, a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding him. A man observed him with disdain, his arrogance impossible to hide. What happened next would leave everyone on that plane speechless and alter one life forever. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this, be sure to subscribe because tomorrow we have another special one for you. Los Angeles airport buzzed with its usual chaos, people constantly coming and going, conversations mixing, luggage rolling in every direction. In the midst of it all, one man stood calmly in the first-class line, Keanu Reeves. His attire was simple, a plaid shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed boots. He carried a backpack that seemed to have seen the world. There was nothing flashy about him, and maybe because of that he went unnoticed. Yet anyone who looked closely could sense something different about him. It wasn't just his clothes, but the calmness he radiated. While everyone else seemed rushed and anxious, Keanu stood there, peaceful, soaking in the moment. He didn't mind the glances or the contrast between him and the other passengers. Right behind him stood Victor Harding, the complete opposite of Keanu. Victor wore an expensive suit, polished shoes, and cologne that commanded attention. His every move seemed deliberate, as if he wanted everyone to know how important he was. His eyes scanned the line quickly, and when they landed on Keanu, he couldn't hold back. "First class, huh?" Victor smirked. "You never know who might show up here these days." Keanu turned his head, keeping his expression calm. "Yeah, the world is full of surprises." Victor frowned for a moment, expecting a bigger reaction, something that would confirm his assumptions about the man in front of him. But Keanu stayed silent, as though the comment didn't matter. Victor pushed further. "Look, nothing personal, but you don't seem like the type who flies like this," he said, chuckling softly. "It's rare to see someone so casual in first class." The moment to board arrived. The first-class line began moving, and both Keanu and Victor followed, tickets in hand. Victor walked confidently, while Keanu seemed oblivious to the commotion, walking at the same calm pace he had before. Upon entering the plane, something unexpected happened. Victor checked his ticket again and, looking up, saw Keanu settling into the seat right next to his. "You've got to be kidding me," Victor muttered, shaking his head. He sat down next to Keanu and let out a low chuckle, as though the situation were a joke. Of all places, it had to be here. Keanu merely looked at him, maintaining his calm demeanor and offering a slight smile. "Looks like we're traveling together, then," he said politely. Victor crossed his arms, trying to hide his discomfort. It wasn't just the fact that he was sitting next to Keanu. It was the realization that the man he'd just judged was now sharing the same exclusive space. Keanu's presence unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. As the economy class passengers finished boarding, Victor decided to initiate a conversation, but not in a friendly way. "So, what do you do for a living?" he asked, as if he already knew the answer but wanted confirmation. Keanu, adjusting his backpack under the seat, looked up. "I work in film." Victor raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Oh, I see. Commercials? Small-time stuff." Keanu smiled slightly and shook his head. "Something like that." Victor laughed. "I've always found it interesting how people try to find their place, you know? But sometimes, certain spaces just aren't meant for everyone. Like first class, for example." Keanu assessed the situation, still calm. "I think we all have our place," he replied. "And sometimes it's exactly where we are." Victor let out a short laugh. "That's nice. Kind of philosophical, even. But real life isn't that simple." Keanu didn't respond immediately. He simply turned back to the window, as if the conversation was over. But Victor wasn't done yet. "You know," Victor leaned in slightly, "you might be sitting here, but there are things money can't buy. Some places just don't belong to certain people." This time, Keanu didn't respond with words. He just gave Victor a look, one that blended patience and firmness, saying more than any words could. Victor, realizing his provocation hadn't worked, leaned back into his seat with a satisfied smile. He thought he had the upper hand, but the truth was, things were just beginning. Victor believed he was in control, but Keanu's calmness hid something he didn't expect. With every minute, what seemed like a simple conversation turned into something far bigger. The in-flight service began, and the flight attendant moved through first class offering drinks. Victor made sure to be noticed. "A glass of champagne, please," he said with a confident smile, something that matches the exclusivity of this seat. The flight attendant, accustomed to such demands, nodded with a professional smile. When it was Keanu's turn, he made a simple request. "Just water, please." Victor didn't miss the opportunity to comment. He looked at Keanu, superiority in his gaze, and chuckled. "Water?" he asked, almost laughing. "Don't tell me you're going to waste the experience of flying first class with water." Keanu took the water bottle handed to him and responded calmly, "I'm fine with this." Sometimes simplicity is enough. Victor narrowed his eyes, trying to understand the answer, but quickly decided to push back. "Yeah, I guess that works for people who settle for less. Not everyone is born to enjoy the best life has to offer." Keanu raised the bottle to his lips, taking a small sip. He didn't respond immediately. Other passengers started to notice the tension, but Keanu remained unbothered. "Maybe the best is different for everyone," he said finally, as calm as ever. Victor didn't like the response. Or maybe people who say that just never had access to what really matters. Some things are beyond the reach of certain people, you know? The flight attendant, serving another passenger, glanced at their direction but saw Keanu was handling things just fine. Keanu didn't respond verbally, just offering a slight smile before turning to the window again. Victor, still unsatisfied, began to realize that Keanu was no easy target. As more passengers began to pick up on the tension, Keanu's words seemed to carry weight. Victor, in turn, was starting to feel the shift. His arrogance was losing ground. As the flight attendant returned, Victor continued his provocations. "You know," he said, holding up his champagne glass, "life's like flying first class. You work hard, earn your spot, and then you get to enjoy it. But some people, well, it seems like they're only here because they got lucky." Keanu placed his water bottle on the seat tray and turned to face Victor. "Luck or hard work, we all end up in the same place when the flight lands, don't we?" The cabin went quiet as more passengers took notice. Victor smiled, trying to cover up the impact of the response. "Well, I wouldn't say that. Some of us are simply on a higher level. Not everyone understands the value of being here." Keanu leaned forward slightly, crossing his arms. "I think the value of being here," he gestured around at the cabin, "isn't about what you have, but how you treat others." The words hung in the air, a truth some passengers seemed to recognize, while others exchanged approving glances. Victor, on the other hand, seemed uncomfortable, trying to laugh it off but showing signs of nervousness. "That's a good one," he said sarcastically, "first-class self-help philosophy. Maybe you should consider giving motivational talks." Keanu gave a short smile and turned back to face forward, ending the conversation without further words. His calm demeanor spoke volumes, and passengers around them began to shift their attention. Some whispered, while others shot disapproving looks at Victor. Victor realized he was no longer the center of attention. The passengers' reactions were no longer in his favor. The atmosphere had shifted. Many passengers were tuned into the exchange, and an older man nearby turned to observe more closely, shaking his head in disapproval. Victor's once confident posture began to crack, but he refused to admit defeat. The worst, or perhaps the best, was still to come. As the flight continued, Victor remained silent, clearly unsettled. Keanu, however, seemed completely relaxed. Then, the flight attendant approached with a polite smile. "Mr. Reeves, the captain asked me to inform you that your connection in Tokyo is confirmed. He also sends his best regards." The name Reeves echoed through the cabin. Passengers who had been quietly observing now widened their eyes. A murmur began to spread. Victor froze. "Reeves," he muttered, almost in disbelief. "Keanu Reeves?" Keanu nodded politely, thanking the flight attendant without much attention to the commotion. He turned to Victor, who now looked at him in shock. "Is something wrong?" Keanu asked with a slight smile. Victor, struggling for words, looked around, noticing the passengers' curious and disapproving stares. He sank into his seat, trying to justify his actions.
I
didn't know who you were, he mumbled. Keanu kept his tone calm but firm. I didn't think it was necessary. I don't usually use my name as a calling card.